I'm going to read a question from Manolo. Um, what would be the best way to explain to someone who is used to celebrating the 4th of July, the Red Nation's position on the holiday and what it represents? Also, what is the distinction from an Indigenous perspective between Thanksgiving and the 4th of July in terms of both understanding and observance? Um, and this is an interesting question because it to me the first thing I thought of when I read it was it highlights how little education is actually done in this country around the truth of both of these holidays. So I don't know that I can speak for the entire Red Nation, but I'm going to speak for myself and say that, like, Thanksgiving is a made up settler fantasy of some beautiful feasts where the Wampanoags welcomed the dirty, stinking, unwashed pilgrims. Because those people did not bathe, right? They came over on the Mayflower, didn't bathe the whole time they were on that boat, and then they got to Plymouth Rock, and they didn't bathe here either because they were religious fundamentalists and they didn't believe in bathing. So this is what y'all are celebrating. You're celebrating a bunch of stinky, unwashed people who landed off the coast of Massachusetts and had no clue how to live. They didn't know how to farm. They didn't know how to hunt. They almost starved to death the first winter. They were, and I don't know, I will admit to not knowing the in-depth history of this, but I know that they were saved by Tisquantum, who is better known in history as Squanto, who was kidnapped and sold into slavery by the English and managed to escape and come back to his home country, his homeland. And he either took pity on these poor stinky pilgrims, or there was something that he wanted, maybe to know how long they were going to stay, but actually helped teach them how to grow crops and how to live. And they celebrated the first harvest with these people. That's the myth about Thanksgiving. It's really nothing to celebrate for Native people, for Red Nation people in particular. We call it No Thanks, No Giving, because it's literally the beginning of genocide on our homelands across Turtle Island, starting in the east and moving all the way to the west. That's my understanding of the history of Thanksgiving, and the idea that what children are taught to, make little, and I still saw this when my kids were little paper headdresses with paper feathers to represent the Indians, and turkeys, and this great idea of feasting. Feasting is indigenous. There's no question about that. But the lie that created that holiday is super offensive, and just, I don't know. Why would you want to celebrate those people? Like, seriously, they stunk.
Just celebrating bad hygiene.
Just celebrating bad hygiene. Yeah, they didn't wash. They were really stinky. 4th of July. Now, 4th of July is worse in a way, in that it actually celebrates the Second Continental Congress ratification of the Declaration of Independence, which is why we are called today merciless Indian savages. And it was the creation of the fascist settler state that we are talking about on this holiday, and what I think Melanie really literally just laid out what happened in Rapid City, why no killer cops. That all of that fascist settler state started with the Declaration of Independence and the description of Native people as merciless Indian savages. Um, so why would we celebrate that? Like, why would we want to recognize that day when it really just legitimized the genocide that had already been happening and that continued to happen? You know, from sea to shining sea and manifest destiny and all that other crap that people celebrate because they don't understand the true history of this country. So, my thanks to Manolo for asking this question. And if you really want to understand the truth about the founding of this colonial project, then read Indigenous authors. So read Ned Blackhawk, read Native authors who are cutting through all the bullshit and actually um, having real conversations about the founding of this so-called nation. And then, you don't have to ask for an Indigenous person's perspective on these holidays. As a human being, you can talk about your own feelings about these holidays because they're fantasies and they're lies that have been told since the 1700s. They're not real, and you should know the truth. And if you know the truth, you don't have to ask us. You can just say it yourself.
Yeah, listening to what you're just saying, Elena, it came to mind like Thanksgiving. I feel like Thanksgiving is about the good Indians and the 4th of July is about the bad Indians, right? Because the language of merciless Indian savages, right? That is attached to the Declaration of Independence, which is what's celebrated on July 4th. But then the notion of like the hospitable, Indians who welcomed the pilgrims, which is what Thanksgiving celebrates. Like we hug or whatever the fuck we're supposed to be doing. But one is like the vanquishing or like the conquering of indigenous people of the merciless Indian savage. And the other one is like how we made friends and like how we live peacefully. We coexist peacefully today. So they both serve the same function, right? They both reinforce these stereotypes of the good Indian and the bad Indian. But nevertheless, they're both just about naturalizing and normalizing, settler claims to dispossessed land and hegemony behind U.S. nationalism. So they're both very patriotic holidays.
They are.
Right?
And they're both, and they're both, designated by presidents of the United States who are men. So they're also very, very patriotic, but also very patriarchal.